Welcome to Recognised, where we explore authority, credibility, and the gap between being good at what you do and being recognised for it. Today I want to talk about something I see constantly among founders, experts, and highly capable professionals: the translation gap. And more specifically, why so many brilliant people are actually making themselves harder to recognise professionally without even realising it. We all know them, and if we're honest, many of us have probably been guilty of it ourselves at some point. The multi-hyphenate professional, whose introduction gets progressively longer the more experienced they become. Founder, consultant, speaker, strategist, advisor, facilitator, creative, coach. Sometimes all at once. Or the person operating multiple businesses under multiple brands, speaking to multiple audiences simultaneously. Trying to communicate every dimension of what they can do because narrowing feels uncomfortable. Because surely visibility should reflect the full complexity of who we are. And in many ways, that instinct makes sense. We're living in a world increasingly built around portfolio careers. People are no longer doing one thing professionally for 30 years. Expertise is layered now. Careers are layered. But professionally, that creates a very specific problem. People stop knowing where to place you. And psychologically, that matters more than many experts realise. Because audiences do not experience us with the same level of context we experience ourselves. They're not following the nuance of our evolution in real time. They encounter fragments instead. A LinkedIn headline, a speaker bio, a website homepage, a podcast appearance, a recommendation from someone else. And from those fragments, they try to build a coherent understanding of who we are, what we do, and why we matter. That process happens astonishingly quickly, which means the people who become highly recognised are often not simply the people with the deepest expertise. They are the people whose expertise translates clearly under conditions of limited attention. That distinction changes everything. Working within media, I see this translation problem constantly. Founders send beautifully detailed press releases filled with information, statistics, and company background, yet never clearly explain why the story matters to a wider audience. Experts pitch themselves for interviews using language so broad that producers cannot immediately identify where the authority actually sits. And businesses, well, they describe every service they offer, every audience they support, and every problem they can technically solve, while accidentally making themselves harder to understand in the process. And often the expertise is genuine. The problem is not substance. The problem is translation. People mistake information for positioning, and the two are not the same thing. There's a concept in psychology called cognitive fluency. Essentially, human beings are more likely to trust and remember things that feel easier to mentally process. Not simplistic, clear. That nuance matters. Because audiences are not only evaluating whether someone is intelligent or experienced, they're also evaluating whether they understand them quickly enough to feel confident, to recommend them, to book them, to refer them, and especially to buy from them. And this is where many experts unintentionally create friction around their own value. The founder trying to appeal to everyone at once, the consultant listing 7 different specialist areas equally, the entrepreneur who can technically solve dozens of problems but has never established one dominant association in the mind of the market. Everything may be true, but truth without hierarchy creates confusion, and confusion is commercially expensive. Not only in the terms of visibility, but in referrals, partnerships, media opportunities, speaking invitations, audience growth, and customer conversion, because people struggle to advocate clearly for what they cannot quickly describe to somebody else. That's why some incredibly capable people remain quietly respected for years, while others become instantly recognizable. And it's not necessarily because they possess more expertise. It's because their positioning creates stronger mental associations. Let's take someone like Rory Sutherland. His thinking is nuanced, behavioural and intellectually layered, yet his public positioning is remarkably clear: behavioural science, advertising and human decision making. The audience immediately understands the category he occupies. Or someone like Bozoma St. John. She operates across branding, leadership, marketing, and cultural commentary, but her public identity remains strongly anchored around bold executive leadership and brand strategy. Multiple dimensions still sit beneath one dominant recognition point, and that's the difference many professionals miss. The market does not experience us with the same complexity that we experience ourselves. It simplifies first and then explores depth later. And often the people struggling most with this are highly intelligent individuals who fear being reduced by clarity. They worry that narrowing their positioning excludes opportunities or diminishes the breadth of what they can offer. So instead, they attempt to communicate everything simultaneously. Ironically, this often produces the exact opposite outcome, because breadth without structure makes expertise harder to translate socially. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as the curse of knowledge. Once people become deeply immersed in their own expertise, it becomes difficult for them to remember what it feels like not to possess that same context. Experts begin communicating from inside their understanding rather than from the audience's perspective. So they over-explain, they over-qualify, they add more nuance, more details and more caveats. Meanwhile, the audience is still trying to answer much simpler questions. Who is this person? What are they actually known for? And why should we care? And increasingly, those questions determine where opportunities flow. This is particularly relevant now because authority no longer operates privately. Founders are expected to communicate publicly. Executives are expected to articulate perspective visibly. Experts are expected to contribute ideas publicly. Businesses themselves are increasingly filtered through the people attached to them, which means communication is no longer separate from commercial positioning. It is commercial positioning. And yes, I realise there is a certain irony in someone who works across broadcasting, facilitation, strategy and media, writing about the importance of being professionally translatable. But that is also precisely why authority positioning became such a core part of my work. It's not to reduce complexity, but to ensure expertise remain recognisable, communicable and commercially valuable in a world overloaded with information. Because increasingly, opportunities do not flow only towards the most capable person in the room. In fact, they now flow towards the person whose value can be understood quickly enough for trust, recognition, and action to follow. Until next time, stay credible, stay visible, and most importantly, that's right, stay recognized.